Hello and welcome back to my studio. Sometimes it's nice to step out of our comfort zones and instead of using local colour such as greens and browns for our landscapes, it's nice to use unexpected colours to kind of experiment and play around with ideas and see what happens. And as long as we get our tonal values right, enough darks, lights and midtones, we can play around with any colours that we want to, and it can be a great way of discovering new and exciting colour palettes. So this is what I'm going to show you today, this sort of semi-abstract sunset scene. As always, I'm going to draw out my scene first lightly in pencil. I'm using a Koh-i-Noor clutch pencil just to sketch in the position of my trees and my main branches, a few canopies and just a little bit of the sort of lay of the land. But I'm going to be trying to keep things very abstract and very loose, so I don't need much in the way of a roadmap today. So I'm going to start off using a limited palette and using the wet in wet method. Today my paper is Saunders Waterford cold pressed watercolour paper. It's taped to my board and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees. With my 1.5 inch Princeton Aqua Elite modeler, I've wet the page all over, and now this is yellow ochre. This beautiful rich yellow ochre is going to give me this beautiful glow in the sky. I've added some burnt sienna to it to make it even more glowy. And now I'm painting a graduated wash using horizontal brush strokes, allowing the brush to sort of run out as it comes down the page, then adding a little bit more yellow ochre, and now really going into the ground plane with rich deep colours almost straight from the tube. And I'm just working these colours in and around the ground plane, around the trunks of my trees. So I'm now adding in Payne's Grey and Indigo along with the burnt sienna and the yellow ochre, and I'm getting some really lovely diffusions, but the paint is staying strongly where it is as well as diffusing at the edges because the paint that I've used is so rich. Sweeping in some slightly plainer, lighter value across the right hand side, and that should contrast with all the colour and tone that I've got on the left. While my sky is still damp, I'm going to use a drier mix of Payne's Grey with some burnt sienna and a little bit of indigo in it now, and the corner of my brush to place my tree canopies. I'm doing this so as the tree canopy colours will soften and diffuse into the background wash and just give me some really lovely effects. Using my palette knife, I'm scraping through the damp, rich paint. This will give me a variety of marks. Where the paint is only damp, I'll get a pale mark, like a highlight where it scrapes back to the white of the paper. But where the page is still quite wet, the paint will soak back into the mark that I've made and give me a dark mark. So I'm getting quite a variety here. You can see that I'm working with my drawing and following the pencil lines that I can see through the washes, but I'm also working with the canopy shapes and connecting them. And if you look closely across the tape, you can see I've got that beautiful sort of bloom across the bottom has given me that amazing effect that I could never have painted myself. But that's one of the wonderful things about happy accidents that can happen when you experiment and deliberately relinquish some of the control and just see what happens. I'm now going to leave it to dry, and while it's drying, a quick plug for my book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. It's now available to purchase from all good bookstores. There are a couple of links in the description below. So here's the dry painting. It's lightened back a bit, but you can see I've still kept those lovely rich colours by selecting colours that work really beautifully together and that complement each other. Of course, yellow and black really do contrast well against each other, and I think that's part of the secret to the appeal of this particular colour palette. I'm now using a mixture of Payne's Grey, Indigo and Burnt Sienna and my rigger brush to paint in the trunks and the branches. I'm going to be painting around the marks that I scraped in the earlier wash with my palette knife, so that a lot of those marks will still show through. This way I can create even more depth and variety very simply. Trying to keep my marks in character with the shape of the tree, working in and around the canopies, sort of joining them together. Whoops, that could have been a disaster. Dropped the paintbrush, got a big smear of paint, but I can quickly dab that off of the painting with a tissue. It's left a slight mark, but because my foreground is so sort of abstract and random, it won't notice. It will just become part of the texture. So crisis averted. And now back to continuing to work on finessing these trees. And I think that will do for this experiment. I'm quite happy with it. I think the trees are convincing enough without being overworked, and I really love the effects that have been created in the ground plane below the trees. I think sometimes it's really good to step out of your comfort zone and pick some different colours to play with and just see what happens. As long as you think about your values, then your scene will still be convincing, even if you're not using typical local colours. And of course, practicing your tonal values is really important, and an experiment like this can really sort of help you to really improve in that area for your more planned paintings. So I'd encourage you to experiment and to enjoy the happy accidents that happen when you relinquish control of watercolour. I think the problem is that we try sometimes too much to tame watercolour, when really I think that we should be collaborating and working with watercolour instead of trying to bend it to our will. And once we can sort of go with the flow, then we end up discovering that we can work in a much more sort of fluid and fluent way with our watercolour paintings. And I think relaxing and going with the flow like this is a great way to loosen up and to improve and progress with your watercolour painting for your more planned paintings. Well, I hope you found that helpful. If you enjoyed the video, then please click on the thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, then I invite you to do so. It really helps us with our reach. And thank you so much to everyone that supports the channel on Patreon. We really do appreciate you. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.